All right. So, you sent this over, The Ethics of Intelligence. Pretty interesting title, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, a lot of times when we hear that word intelligence, we kind of automatically think like IQ tests or,
Yeah.
like how many facts can you just rattle off from memory?
Right, right.
But this document goes so much deeper than that. And that's what we're going to deep dive into today.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's not just about like rote memorization or just like having this database of facts in your head. This document really emphasizes that intelligence is so much more nuanced.
Mm.
It's about things like your ability to discern like what's actually important to pay attention to. It's
Hmm.
about timing, it's about empathy, it's about your capacity to learn and grow.
Like how transformable you are as a person.
Exactly.
And, it talks about all these different kinds of intelligence, like crystallized intelligence, which I think of as kind of like that database that you were talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's like the accumulated knowledge and experience over time.
Right. And then there's fluid intelligence, which is more about like problem solving in real time, like that mental processing power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, how quickly you can adapt to new situations or problems.
Right. And then it goes even beyond that and talks about emotional intelligence, like how well do you understand and manage your own emotions? And how well do you understand the emotions of other people?
Right.
And then relational intelligence, like how do you connect with people? How do you build relationships?
Yeah.
And then cultural intelligence and even moral intelligence.
Right.
So it really expands our idea of what it means to be smart.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just a one-dimensional thing.
And, the whole document kind of kicks off with this central question that I think is so relevant, especially for you, someone who wants to like really deeply understand things, but doesn't want to get lost in all the details.
Right.
And the question isn't just how much you know, but how you know why you know and what you do with what you know.
Right. And I love that because it really shifts the focus away from just like consumption of information and more towards like engagement with the information.
Right.
And the document, I think, gets into that really nicely with this distinction between knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
Right. So we're living in this age of information where it's so easy to find an answer to any question you might have or to remember a fact.
Right.
So someone who can do that quickly might appear very intelligent,
Right.
but the document is saying that there's more to it than that.
It says, and I love this phrasing, wisdom is metabolized knowledge.
I love that too.
It's not just having. All the ingredients sitting there,
Yeah.
It's knowing how to combine them to create something
Right.
delicious or meaningful or whatever it is.
Exactly. And it uses this really great analogy. It says, knowledge is having the mappa. Wisdom is knowing which route to take and when to walk off the path.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just about like possessing the information, but also about understanding the context.
Applying it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And using it in a way that's actually beneficial.
So, I mean, for you listening,
Mm-hmm.
like as you're going about learning things, think about it in terms of, it's not just enough to just have all the facts,
Right.
but it's like, how do those facts fit together? What are
Right.
the implications of them?
Right.
How could I use them in different situations?
Yeah. And what are the connections between them?
Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us into this next idea of the moral weight of being informed.
Yeah.
And the document asks this really thought-provoking question. It says, if your actions impact others, then isn't there a moral obligation to be informed to make decisions with awareness?
Right. And I think that's so powerful because it's pushing us to think about intelligence, not just as something that's, within our own heads, but also about how it interacts with the world around us.
Exactly.
And how it influences our actions and our decisions.
Yeah. And it's saying that, choosing not to know isn't always a neutral stance.
Right.
In a lot of cases, it can actually have moral implications because if our decisions affect other people, then, actively avoiding knowledge could actually be a problem.
Exactly.
And it talks about, the emotional impact of this awareness. It says, once you know, you can't unknow.
Right.
And that awareness can carry a heavy emotional tax. The more you understand, the more you feel responsible.
I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. As you learn more about the world and the problems that exist, it can definitely feel heavy.
Yeah, it's like this interesting paradox, right? Where intelligence expands our sense of duty while often shrinking our sense of peace.
Yeah. And I think that really gets to the heart of this whole discussion about the ethics of intelligence. It's not just about acquiring knowledge, but also about what we do with that knowledge and how
Yes,
we
and
manage the responsibility that comes with it.
And then, the document kind of goes into this really challenging area of like, well, how do we even define what's good?
Right.
Because if we say that, intelligence should lead us towards positive consequences.
Yeah.
Well, then what's positive? You know, what one person or group might consider a positive outcome, someone else might see it completely differently.
Exactly. And, the document touches on this concept of moral relativism, which is this idea that, what's considered right or wrong can vary a lot between different cultures or individuals.
Right.
And so recognizing that the document kind of proposes this more pragmatic approach to ethics,
Okay.
which is focusing on actions that tend to reduce harm,
Okay.
increase overall well-being, and contribute to like the long-term sustainability of things.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it's kind of moving away from trying to define like this absolute definition of good.
Right.
And instead it's like, well, what are some outcomes that pretty much everyone could agree are desirable?
Exactly. Yeah, it's about finding some common ground in terms of, what we're striving for.
Okay. I like that. That seems very practical.
Yeah.
But what about like situations where those principles might conflict with each other?
Right.
Because, if I'm trying to live by those principles in my own life,
Yeah.
I can definitely imagine situations where it's like, well, doing this might reduce harm, but it might also, decrease well-being in this other area or whatever. So how does the document address that?
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think the document acknowledges that there aren't always easy answers
Yeah.
when it comes to those kinds of conflicts.
Yeah.
But it emphasizes the importance of like thoughtful consideration
Mhm.
and really weighing the potential consequences of your different actions
Okay.
based on those principles.
Right. So it's not giving you like a formula. It's more
Yeah.
giving you like a framework for thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about trying to find the path that best aligns with those values,
Right.
even when it's not a clear-cut choice.
Okay, I like that. And that kind of pragmatism also extends to, I think, this whole idea of like lifelong learning
Yes.
and, our own mental limits. Because the idea of like constantly learning and growing is definitely appealing. But the document also points out that it can be incredibly overwhelming.
It can feel like you're on this never-ending treadmill of like always having to learn more, always having to do more. And it says, enough is never enough.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, especially in today's world where there's so much information available to us.
Right.
And there's this pressure to always be staying ahead of the curve.
It's very easy to feel overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And I think the document makes a really good point when it says, we each have cognitive limits.
Yes.
Intelligence varies across people,
Mhm.
and we can't be experts in everything.
Right.
And I think the key takeaway here, especially for you, is that intelligence isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing what matters most to you and when to let go of the rest.
That is huge. That is so important.
Yeah. So it's about being intentional with your learning
Yes.
and focusing on the things that are actually going to move you forward in the direction that you want to go.
And this kind of leads us into this really interesting challenge that's posed by the internet and AI,
Right.
which is something the document talks about.
It says now that the internet and AI can answer almost any question instantly. Why should we even learn?
Right.
Why not just look it up?
Yeah.
Which is such a valid question in this day and age.
It is, yeah. It's something that I think we all grapple with to some extent.
Right. Like, I use Google constantly.
True.
So it's like, yeah, why do I need to store this in my brain when I could just ask the all-knowing Google?
Exactly. And I think that's where the document makes this really important distinction between having access to information
Okay.
and actually understanding it.
Right. So just because you can Google the definition of something doesn't mean you actually understand it.
Right. And it says knowing facts isn't the same as understanding them, and understanding isn't the same as embodying them.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So you can have all of this data at your fingertips,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily translate into, wisdom or the ability to actually use that information in a meaningful way.
Right. Or even like connect to it on an emotional level,
Right. Exactly.
which I think is a huge part of learning.
Yeah.
Like if you're not emotionally invested in it,
Yeah.
it's not going to stick.
Yeah, and the document talks about this idea of like drowning in data and starving for meaning,
Oh, that's so good.
which I think really resonates with where we are right now. We have access to more information than ever before, but it can be hard to sift through all of that and find what's actually important.
And to figure out what it all means.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's like this new kind of ignorance where we mistake like just consuming information for actual understanding and personal growth.
Right. Just because you read a Wikipedia article doesn't mean you understand it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about going deeper than that, and the document puts it really succinctly. It says, consumption doesn't equal transformation.
That's really good. And, all of this kind of leads into this other challenge the document brings up, which is the burden of being seen as the smart one.
Yeah.
When your intelligence becomes such a central part of your identity,
Right.
that there can be this pressure to
Yeah.
always have the answers, to always be performing intellectually.
Absolutely. And that can be exhausting.
Yeah, especially if you're someone who genuinely, is driven to learn and understand things.
Right.
There's this feeling like you can never let your guard down.
Exactly. And I think that ties into this larger societal expectation to always be growing and optimizing ourselves.
Yes.
Which makes it feel like it's not okay to just take a break or just be in the moment.
Right.
You always have to be striving for something more.
Right. Like you're failing if you're not constantly producing something or learning something.
Exactly. And the document asks this really provocative question. It says, is it okay to just exist?
I love that question. And I think a lot of us need to ask ourselves that question more often.
Nice.
Because, we get so caught up in this productivity mindset
Yeah.
that we forget that it's okay to just be.
Yeah.
And the document actually offers this really interesting perspective on what we often think of as wasting time. Because we tend to think of that as like a negative thing.
Yeah.
But the document suggests that those moments that seem unproductive can actually be incredibly valuable.
I agree.
Because they can spark new ideas and insights.
Yeah.
And it even references Isaac Newton, like that classic story of him just sitting under the tree and having this aha moment about gravity.
Right.
That came from stillness. It wasn't like he was in the lab working on some experiment.
Exactly. And the document says stillness often precedes insight.
That's so true.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important reminder for all of us, especially those of us who are, constantly on the go.
Always trying to optimize.
Yeah. It's important to give ourselves permission to just be.
Right. And it's not even just about giving yourself permission. It's like reframing it.
Yes.
Because the document kind of flips it and says, maybe the real issue isn't wasting time.
Yeah.
But fearing what stillness will reveal, because when we're constantly distracted and busy,
Yeah.
we don't have to face those deeper questions or those deeper thoughts.
Right.
That might come up if we actually just sat with ourselves for a while.
Yeah. And it's like our busyness becomes a way of avoiding ourselves in a way.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. It's like we're afraid of what we might find if we actually slow down.
Exactly. And the document encourages us to see those periods of rest and reflection not as empty voids,
Right.
but as fertile ground for deeper understanding and personal growth.
I love that.
And it says time isn't wasted when it nurtures your being.
Oh, that's beautiful. And, kind of shifting gears a little bit, the document also talks about the power of relational and communal intelligence, which is this idea that, we don't have to figure everything out on our own.
Right.
Which I think is such an important message because we live in such an individualistic society
Yeah.
that we often forget the power of collaboration and just talking things through with other people.
Right. And the document makes this point that, in dialogue, we refine ideas. In disagreement, we expand perspectives. And in community, we balance out each other's blind spots.
Right, like other people can see things that we can't see.
Exactly. And so it's really about recognizing that the collective intelligence of a group can often be much greater
Way greater.
than the sum of its individual parts.
Right, and I think that's something that you've probably experienced in your own life.
Absolutely.
When you're working on a problem or you're trying to understand something,
Yeah.
you talk to other people about it.
Yeah.
You often come away with a much richer understanding than you would have had if you had just stayed in your own head.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important reminder that learning and growth don't have to be solitary activities.
Right.
Engaging with others, even when you have different viewpoints, can lead to a much more well-rounded understanding of the world.
Yes, and the document says, together, we hold the potential for collective wisdom.
Love
Oh,
that.
beautiful. And then, as we kind of start to wrap up here,
Yeah.
the document offers this really insightful conclusion, and it points out this interesting irony that the truly intelligent often doubt themselves, while the uninformed often speak with the most conviction.
It's so true, isn't it?
It is. It's kind of humbling
It is.
because it suggests that, the more you learn, the more you become aware of the vastness of what you don't know.
Right.
And so that can lead to a sense of humility.
Yeah.
While people who maybe haven't explored as much,
Yeah.
they might feel more certain about things because they don't even realize how much they don't know.
Right. It's like they're still in that blissful ignorance.
Right. And the document puts it so beautifully. It says, maybe the real goal isn't to feel smart, it's to feel whole.
I love that.
Me too.
It's such a beautiful reframe.
Yeah, and it really shifts our focus away from just accumulating knowledge
Right.
to living a life that feels meaningful and aligned.
Yeah.
And, it talks about cultivating qualities like being curious, kind-of-old, reflective, and willing to change.
Right.
And it's like those are the real hallmarks of intelligence in action. And the final thought that the document leaves us with is you don't have to carry the entire weight of the world's knowledge.
Yeah.
You just have to live well with the part you hold.
I think that's so comforting
Yeah.
because it's like giving us permission to let go of that pressure, to
Right.
know everything.
Yeah, it's like it's okay to just focus on what resonates with you,
Right.
what matters to you.
Yeah. And to trust that that's enough.
Yeah, and maybe building on that, we could consider that sometimes this relentless pursuit of acquiring more and more knowledge
Yeah.
might actually be obscuring the deeper wisdom that comes from just being present,
Right.
taking time for reflection and nurturing our connections with other people.
Yeah.
So maybe the real art is in finding that balance
Absolutely.
between our desire to know
Yeah.
and our need to just be.
Beautifully said.
Well, thank you, and thank you for listening to The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.